Welcome to this remote training session. My name is Kelly and I'm an occupational therapist. This session focuses on promoting independence in dressing. The aims of the session is to identify barriers and facilitators to developing independence in dressing, learn how to break down a task, also known as a task analysis, increase your understanding of backward chaining, and develop an awareness of prompt levels. First, we want you to be a detective. Find out why the child is struggling. Consider the child's current level of ability, observe them doing the task, and consider what factors prevent the child from doing the task. Here are some environmental factors that can be a barrier to dressing. Time. Not enough time or limited opportunities throughout the week to practice. Siblings. You might have other children who need your help to get ready in the morning. Tight clothing, such as tights, jeans, skirts, or non-elasticated clothes. Kids might be growing out of their current clothes also. Clothes fastenings. They might be able to get dressed and undressed but struggle with buttons, zips, and clasps. There might be limited space. And the sensory environment, like sounds, temperatures, smells, and lights. Sometimes we as adults can be a barrier to a child's independence in dressing, such as underestimating what the child is capable of, not giving them enough time or opportunity to initiate or persevere themselves, giving help and intervening too soon, giving lots of verbal prompts, and not considering the processing time. The child might need longer to process our instructions. Here are some environmental factors that can promote independence in dressing. So working on dressing when there are no time constraints in the evening after school. Furniture available for the child to sit on, as this eliminates the need to balance on one leg, and if sitting on a chair, ensure it's an appropriate size so their feet are flat on the floor and their hips are at 90 degrees. The correct sensory environment, so again that's your temperature, smells and lights for the child. Break down the task into smaller steps, and we will go through this later. And make it motivating and functional. Give the child a reason to get dressed, like putting on shoes to go outside, to go to the park or go for a walk. Create more opportunities to practice dressing, such as dressing up, or taking their jumper off, or putting on an apron for messy play, changing into shorts and taking off their shoes and socks for activities such as foot spa, foot painting, or going on a bear hunt walk through different textures. Taking off their shoes and socks to jump on the trampoline. Breaking down the task into smaller steps is also called a task analysis. Here are 8 steps to putting on your socks. I want you to try and put these in order. So here is the correct order. I hope you got it right. Now I want you to try breaking down a task into small steps. Write down the steps to putting on your trousers. I'll give you a minute to do this. Pause the video. How many steps did you come up with? So some of you might have come up with something similar to the box on the right. As you can see, this breaks down the task into 5 steps. Picking up the trousers, threading one foot into the trouser leg, threading the other foot, pulling up the trousers and fastening them. However, there are a lot more steps to putting on your trousers. Because it comes so naturally to us, it's easy to forget them. When it's broken down into small steps like this, you can see that pushing on your trousers can be a lot more difficult than we first thought. When we teach dressing, we use a technique called backward chaining. This involves breaking down the task into small steps and teaching the last step first. The adult starts the task and the child only does the last step. This effectively lets the child finish the task independently, which helps them feel like they've achieved something. Once the child has mastered the last step, we teach them the penultimate step, the step before. Gradually, the adult does less as the child is able to do more of the task themselves. In this this video you will see the adult doing all the steps to putting on trousers except the last one, that is pulling up over the hips, which the child does. This is backward chaining. The child is finishing the task. The adult gives the child time to initiate and encourages them to finish the task by giving them a silent gestural prompt, pointing to the trousers.
In the first instance, the adult does the majority of the work. Thread each of the child's feet into the trouser legs and then pull up the trousers until just below the waist. Encourage your child to pull the trousers up the rest of the way. Remember to give them time to do this themselves, and praise them when they do. When your child is consistently and confidently doing this last step, you can then start to leave the trousers lower down the leg. So for example, upper or mid-thigh, and then when they are getting good at this, then you can move it further down the leg, so at their knees. And once they are pulling up from the knees, you can then move it even further down to the ankles.
So once the child can do the last step, we teach them how to do the step before, pulling their trousers from their mid-thigh, their knees, then their ankles.
When your child is consistently and confidently pulling up their trousers from here, then it's time to move on to threading. To start, thread one leg into the corresponding trouser leg and then hold the other trouser leg open. When your child can consistently, confidently thread their second leg into their trousers like this, you can then leave the second trouser leg on the floor once you've put their first leg in the trousers. And when they're good at this, you can then move to just putting the trousers on the floor in front of them.
So once the child can pull up trousers from their ankles, you teach them the step before, which was threading their leg through the trousers. Here's another example of backward chaining. In the series of pictures, you can see that the adult does all the steps to putting on the sock, except the last one. The child does this one, pulling the sock up their leg. Once the child is confident with the last step, you teach them the penultimate step, which is pulling up over the heel. As you can see, the adult is doing less and the child is doing more. The child continues to do more of the steps. Here, the adult is doing the first step and the child is finishing the task. And here, the child is independently putting on their socks. If at any stage you have given the child time, encourage the child to do it themselves, and there is still no initiation, we recommend that you use silent physical prompts to support the child to complete the task. Naturally, we tend to use verbal prompting, for example, put your jumper on, don't forget this arm, etc. However, when teaching dressing, we avoid verbal prompting because children can become dependent and wait for these prompts. They are also harder to fade, so that is why we would recommend silent physical prompts, as these can be faded. You will see how in the videos.
As mentioned, if at any of these stages your child does not initiate after being given the opportunity to, you can support them to succeed within the task by using silent physical prompting. Here are some examples. Silently placing the child's hands where they need to be and initiating the movement required. Silently placing their hands where they need to be, then letting go. They do the rest. Gently tapping their arm. Or gently tapping their leg.
As you can see, the silent physical prompt could be faded from a full physical prompt to a partial physical prompt and then to a gestural prompt, which was tapping the leg or arm. There you are increasing the child's independence. Here's another example of how to provide silent physical prompts. If the child does not initiate, silently physically prompt them to hold and pull up the sock to complete the task.
and praise the child. Now it's time to fade the prompts. The adult positions the child's fingers on the sock and then lets go of the child's hands. The child pulls up the sock independently. Similarly, the adult positions both hands and then lets go.
As you could see, the silent physical prompt could be faded from a full physical prompt to a partial physical prompt, increasing the child's independence.
If your child does initiate, but isn't successful on their first attempt, encourage them to keep trying, and again, give them the opportunity to persevere and succeed in the task themselves. And don't forget, every step of the way, to praise, praise, praise.
As you could see in the video, when the child was given time and encouraged to persevere, they completed the task. Now that the child can put on the individual item, the next step is to sequence the steps of dressing. Once children are independent in putting on individual items of clothes, again, we can often naturally want to give them verbal prompts to support them. Now put on your shirt next to your trousers, but this can lead to prompt dependency. So therefore, we recommend not to use verbal prompts. Instead, use silent physical prompts, as these can be faded, as you saw in the videos. There's no right way of dressing. For example, there are different ways to put on your socks. Bunch them up, like on the right, or pull them from the top of the sock, like on the left. You can also put on your socks in different positions, sitting on a chair and pushing one leg on top of the other, or pulling your leg up to your chest. Or without a chair, you can half kneel on the floor, you can sit on the floor, or you can stand. There are also different ways to take off a jumper. Crossing your arms over your body and pulling up from the bottom of the jumper, or from pulling up from the front, pulling up from the back, or by first taking your arm out and then your head. How do you take off your jumper? When teaching kids to take off their jumper, some methods are easier than others. You will see in the video.
Here are some ways the child may try to take off their jumper. So as you can see, these ways of taking off a jumper can make it more difficult for the child to succeed within this task and make it more effortful for them. Removing one arm from the jumper first can make it easier for the child to take the jumper off.
There's also no right way to sequence dressing and undressing. Some people put their t-shirt on first, and others put their trousers on first. Children who are already dressing and have compensatory strategies, you don't need to reteach them if their approach is functional and they are independent. However, there's always an exception to the rule. When you're at home, it's appropriate to get fully undressed before putting different clothes on. For example, when you're getting ready for bed, and if this is what your child is doing, you do not need to change this. But as they get older, we need to consider their dignity and vulnerability, especially when out and about in the community. For example, when there are other people around, it might be more appropriate to take off one item at a time. So if you take your top off, put on the other top before you go and take your trousers off. Here are some general strategies to promote independence in dressing. Let's start with clothing. so looser, bigger items of clothing or elasticated trousers. Shoes or Velcro straps versus laces. And grade the task. Start with larger fastenings such as chunky zips and big buttons. And then things like books and songs about getting dressed, or dressing games and toys like dressing dolls or dressing puzzles. These also help. You can also use visual schedules to help your child, such as this one shown here. Speak with your speech and language therapist or your occupational therapist, and they can make you customized visuals if needed. In summary, at the Rise Partnership Trust, we recommend that you give the child lots of time, encourage them to do it themselves, and provide lots of opportunities to practice dressing. Use backward chaining, use silent physical prompts, and fade when necessary. And don't forget to praise the child. So we've reached the end of our training session. I hope it's been a useful insight into developing independence in dressing. You can contact us directly via the OT email address, which is shown here, ot@manor.brent.sch.uk. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to hearing about how you've been putting all of this into practice.